The first thing I saw wasn't the ocean. It was my own face. Smiling. Standing on a beach I had never been to. The picture filled the giant screen at my parents' 50th wedding anniversary party, while more than 200 guests applauded. My mother dabbed tears from her eyes as the slideshow rolled through decades of perfect family memories. There I was at 12, wearing a yellow swimsuit. There I was at 15, building a sandcastle beside my younger brother. There I was at 19, laughing under a striped beach umbrella. Except, none of those moments had ever happened. I wasn't there. Every single photo had been edited. Someone had taken old pictures of me from school, birthdays, and random weekends and placed me into vacations I had never attended. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might collapse. People around me smiled. What beautiful memories. You all looked so happy. What an amazing family. I stared at my parents. My mother smiled proudly at the screen. My father squeezed her hand. Neither looked guilty. Neither looked nervous. It was as if they had told this lie so many times that they believed it themselves. Then the next picture appeared. My brother Ethan hugged both of our parents on a cruise ship while my edited face stood beside them. I had spent that summer stocking grocery shelves 50 miles away to pay my college rent. Someone in the crowd laughed. You've always loved traveling together. I couldn't breathe anymore. No, I whispered. Then louder. No. The room fell silent. Every head turned toward me. I wasn't there. The words echoed across the ballroom. My mother's smile disappeared. What are you talking about, Claire? She asked. I wasn't on that trip. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I pointed at the screen with shaking hands. I wasn't on any of those trips. The silence became unbearable. Then my father laughed. Not because something was funny. Because he wanted everyone else to think I was joking. Oh, Claire always exaggerates. Several guests chuckled politely. But I didn't. I have every receipt from those summers, I said. I have work schedules. I have apartment leases. I have hospital records. I wasn't with you. The room grew colder. My brother wouldn't even look at me. Instead, he stared at the floor. That was the moment I knew. He had always known. My name is Claire Mitchell. I'm 33 years old. And for 9 summers, my parents erased me from their lives. Not because I had done something terrible. Not because I ran away. Not because we were estranged. They simply decided that vacations were easier without me. Then they spent years pretending I had been there anyway. If someone had told me this story years ago, I wouldn't have believed it either. Families fight. Parents make mistakes. But who spends nearly a decade pretending one child exists only after the vacation ends? Looking back now, I can see the cracks forming long before I understood what they meant. Growing up, Ethan was the sunshine. I was the rain cloud. At least that's how my mother described us. Ethan lights up every room. Claire thinks too much. Ethan makes everyone laugh. Claire always asks difficult questions. My father wasn't cruel. He simply followed wherever my mother led. If she praised Ethan, he praised Ethan. If she ignored me, he ignored me too. As a little girl, I believed I just needed to try harder. Better grades. Cleaner room. More chores. Less talking. More smiling. I kept waiting for the day they would look at me the way they looked at my brother. That day never came. The first summer I didn't go on vacation. I was 13. Mom said money was tight. We can only afford 3 tickets this year. She hugged me. You'll have more fun staying with Grandma anyway. I believed her. Grandma made pancakes every morning. We watched old movies together. She even let me paint flowers across her fence. It wasn't terrible. When Mom and Dad came home, they brought me a snow globe. We missed you. I smiled. I believed that too. The next summer, it happened again. This time they said Ethan had earned a special reward for making the baseball all-star team. The year after that, Dad claimed I needed summer school. Except I didn't. Then another excuse. And another. Before long, excuses became traditions. Every June, I packed a small overnight bag. Not for the beach. Not for Disney. Not for cruises. For wherever someone else agreed to keep me. Sometimes grandma. Sometimes an aunt. Sometimes neighbors. Once I spent 2 weeks alone in my college apartment because everyone assumed I had somewhere to be. Nobody asked why I never traveled with my own family anymore. Or maybe they did. Maybe my parents lied to them too. A few minutes into this story, I want to know something about you. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I always love seeing how stories like this connect people from different cities, states, and countries. When I turned 21, I finally asked, "Why don't I ever go?" Mom barely looked up from folding laundry. "You're independent." Dad nodded. "Ethan still needs family time." I remember standing there wondering how someone could need family more because they were younger by 3 years. It made no sense. But every explanation they gave somehow became my responsibility. "You understand. You're mature. You don't mind." Eventually, I stopped asking. That was exactly what they wanted. Years passed. I built my own life. I became a physical therapist. I rented my own apartment. Made friends who actually remembered my birthday. Started spending holidays with people who wanted me there. From the outside, everything looked normal. Inside, every June still hurt. Social media filled with smiling beach pictures. Matching family shirts. Cruise dinners. Mountain cabins. Every caption read the same. "Family is everything." Sometimes they tagged me. People commented, "Looks like an amazing trip." I never corrected them. Maybe I was embarrassed. Maybe I hoped one day things would change. Maybe I simply didn't have the strength anymore. Then Grandma died. While cleaning her attic, I found an old cardboard box with my name written across the top. Inside were postcards. 9 of them. One from every summer trip. None addressed to me. Every postcard had been written to Grandma. Every single one. The first read. "So glad Claire isn't here. Ethan finally gets us all to himself." The second. "It's wonderful traveling as a family of 3 again." The third made my stomach twist. "We almost invited Claire this year, but Ethan said vacations aren't the same when she comes." I dropped the postcard. The room spun. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. There were 6 more waiting inside the box. And suddenly I realized. Maybe my brother hadn't just known. Maybe he had been the reason I disappeared in the first place. I sat on the dusty attic floor with Grandma's box open in front of me, surrounded by postcards that suddenly felt heavier than bricks. For years, I had blamed my parents. Now I wasn't sure where Ethan fit into this story. I wanted to believe those words couldn't be true. "We almost invited Claire this year, but Ethan said vacations aren't the same when she comes." I read that sentence over and over until the ink blurred through my tears. Maybe Mom had exaggerated. Maybe Dad had written it carelessly. Maybe there was some explanation I hadn't thought of. But excuses were becoming harder to invent than the truth. Grandma had never mentioned the postcards while she was alive. At first I felt hurt. Then I noticed something folded underneath them. It was a note written in her neat handwriting. "Claire, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I kept these because one day I hoped your parents would tell you the truth. I asked them many times why they kept leaving you behind. They always said it was temporary. It never was. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to fight harder for you." My heart shattered all over again. Grandma had known. She hadn't agreed with them. She had simply lost the battle. I hugged that note against my chest like it was the last hug she had left for me. Have you ever had someone protect you the best they could, even when it wasn't enough? Keep listening because what I found next changed everything. Underneath the note was an envelope. Inside were copies of old family vacation itineraries. Every one of them listed 3 travelers: Dad, Mom, Ethan. Not a single reservation had ever included my name. Not once. Not even by mistake. That meant every excuse they'd ever given me had been planned. Money wasn't tight. Summer school wasn't real. I wasn't staying behind because of bad timing. I was never supposed to go. I drove home in complete silence. I couldn't even turn on the radio. Every song felt too cheerful. Every traffic light felt too long. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. Hey. Mom said you left Grandma's house early. Everything okay? I stared at the message. For the first time in years, I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I scrolled through his social media. Summer after summer. Beach selfies. Cruises. Cabins. Theme parks. Luxury resorts. Every caption sounded almost identical. Couldn't imagine life without these 2. Best family ever. Making memories with my favorite people. Not once had he written, "Wish my sister were here." Not once had he asked where I was. Maybe because he already knew. I finally replied, "Can we meet tomorrow?" His answer came within seconds. "Sure. Coffee?" "No. Somewhere private." He sent me his address. That alone surprised me. Ethan rarely invited anyone to his house. He and his wife Madison had built what everyone called the perfect family. Beautiful home. 2 adorable kids. Golden retriever. White fence. Matching Christmas pajamas. The kind of life people shared online because it looked too perfect to be real. The next afternoon, I stood outside his front door. My hands trembled before I knocked. Madison answered first. "Claire. What a surprise." She hugged me warmly. It didn't feel fake. If anything, she seemed genuinely happy to see me. That confused me. If Ethan had always wanted me gone, had she known? Their 2 children ran into the hallway. Aunt Claire. Both hugged my legs so tightly I almost cried. Children don't fake love. Not like adults do. Ethan walked into the hallway carrying a cup of coffee. The smile on his face disappeared the second he saw my expression. "Can we talk outside?" I asked. He nodded. We walked on to the back patio. Neither of us spoke for almost a minute. Finally, I placed Grandma's postcards on the table. "I found these." His face lost all color. He didn't even pretend to be confused. He knew exactly what they were. "You read them," he whispered. I did. Another long silence. I looked straight into his eyes. "Did you really tell Mom and Dad vacations weren't the same when I came?" He closed his eyes. For several seconds, he didn't answer. Then he sighed. "I was a kid." "That's not an answer." "I know." "Were those your words?" He rubbed both hands across his face. I probably said something like that. Probably. The word hit me harder than if he'd shouted. "You probably?" "I don't remember exactly." "You remember enough." He leaned against the patio railing. "You have to understand how things were." "No," I interrupted. "You have to explain." His shoulders slumped. "When I was little, I noticed Mom and Dad fought less when it was just the 3 of us." "What does that have to do with me?" "They said you always complained." "I was 13. I know." "They said I deserved one thing that was just mine." I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. "One thing. You got 9 years." His eyes filled with tears. "I didn't realize." "You didn't realize I disappeared every June? I thought they still spent time with you." I stared at him. "You thought?" They told me you didn't want to travel anymore. The words froze me. What? They said you preferred staying with Grandma. I blinked. They told me you hated beaches. I love beaches. They told me you got anxious traveling. I've backpacked through 3 states by myself. They said you asked not to come. I couldn't speak. For years, we had both been living inside completely different versions of the same story. Someone had lied. Constantly. Carefully. For nearly a decade. Ethan sat down heavily. I believed them. You never asked me. I was 17 before I realized something felt off. And then, I asked Mom. What did she say? She said bringing it up would hurt your feelings. I shook my head. No. Claire. No. You don't get to blame this entirely on them. I know. You were old enough. I know. You could have called. I know. You could have invited me yourself. I know. His voice cracked so loudly that birds flew from a nearby tree. He covered his face. I've lived with that guilt for years. I wanted to stay angry. Part of me still was. But another part noticed something I hadn't expected. Real regret. Not excuses. Not denial. Regret. He looked up again. Claire. There's something else. Every terrible feeling returned. What? I found out the truth 6 years ago. I felt my stomach drop. You knew. He nodded slowly. I confronted Mom and Dad. What happened? They begged me never to tell you. Why? They said you were finally happy. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you chose to protect them. He didn't answer. Didn't you? Still silence. Then he whispered. They threatened to cut me out of the family if I told you. I took one slow step backward. Another. Everything inside me screamed to leave. He reached toward me. Claire, wait. I stopped. Not because I forgave him. Because I needed one final answer. Why did they care so much about keeping this secret? Ethan swallowed hard. There are letters. What letters? They wrote everything down. What do you mean? They kept journals. I frowned. About the vacations? He looked directly at me. No. About why they chose me over you. Those words echoed in my mind long after I walked away. Whatever was inside those journals. It was apparently worse than 9 stolen summers. And somehow, my parents had managed to hide them for years. If you were in my shoes, would you read those journals? Or would you leave the past buried forever? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever seen favoritism tear a family apart, share your experience below. Your story might remind someone they're not alone. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the slideshow from my parents' anniversary party. My smiling face, pasted into vacations I had never taken. My mother's proud expression. My father's forced laugh. Ethan's guilty silence. Now there were journals. Not just memories. Not just excuses. Written proof. I kept asking myself one question. What could possibly be so awful that 2 parents would hide it for nearly 20 years? The next morning, I called in sick. It wasn't a lie. There was no way I could spend the day helping patients regain strength while I felt like my own legs were giving out beneath me. Around noon, my phone rang. Ethan. I let it ring twice before answering. I found them, he said quietly. My heart skipped. They're still at Mom and Dad's house. You've seen them? No. Then how do you know? I overheard Mom talking to Dad this morning. You were there. I stopped by to drop off the kids. He hesitated. They're scared. I laughed bitterly. They should be. They think you're going to destroy the family. The family they erased me from? Silence. I know, Ethan finally whispered. I just thought you deserved to know they're expecting you. I wasn't planning on going. Another pause. But now I am. Before he could answer, I hung up. Have you ever noticed how people suddenly become afraid of the truth after they've spent years hiding it? Keep watching, because this is where everything changed. My parents lived in the same white colonial house where Ethan and I had grown up. The flower beds were still perfectly trimmed. The porch swing still creaked in the afternoon breeze. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. Mom opened the front door. Her smile disappeared almost instantly. Claire, we need to talk. I don't think that's a good idea today. I wasn't asking. She glanced over my shoulder as if checking whether neighbors were watching. Come inside. Dad was already sitting in the living room. His hands were folded so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. No one offered coffee. No one asked how I was doing. Mom spoke first. Ethan told you. He told me enough. She shot an angry look toward Dad. I knew he couldn't keep his mouth shut. I stared at her. You're upset with him? He betrayed us. I almost laughed. No, Mom. You betrayed me. The room fell silent. Dad finally cleared his throat. We made mistakes. Mistakes. I reached into my purse and pulled out the postcards. These aren't mistakes. They're choices. Mom crossed her arms. You don't understand. Then explain. She looked away. It wasn't personal. That sentence hit harder than any apology ever could. 9 years. And somehow, it wasn't personal. I was your daughter. I know. You left me behind every summer. We thought it was best. For who? Neither answered. I took a slow breath. I know about the journals. For the first time all afternoon, both of them looked genuinely frightened. Mom recovered first. There are no journals. Ethan said there are. He's confused. Dad spoke quietly. They're in the attic. Mom spun toward him. Richard. What? We can't lie forever. She stared at him as though he had just committed the greatest betrayal imaginable. I watched the exchange carefully. Dad looked exhausted. Not angry. Not defensive. Just tired. Like he'd been carrying something far too heavy for far too long. Without another word, he stood up. I'll get them. Mom grabbed his arm. No. It's time. No. Her voice echoed through the house. I said no. Dad gently pulled his arm free. I've spent 20 years choosing peace over honesty. He looked at me. I can't do it anymore. He disappeared upstairs. Mom sank into the couch. For the first time in my life. She looked small. Not powerful. Not confident. Scared. I did what I thought was right, she whispered. I sat across from her. Then tell me why. She shook her head. You'll hate me. I already don't recognize you. Tears rolled down her cheeks. When you were born. She stopped. Her voice broke. You looked exactly like someone else. I frowned. What does that mean? She wiped her eyes. My older sister, Emily. I remembered Aunt Emily. Barely. She had died before I turned 5. Everyone said she was beautiful. Kind. The life of every family gathering. What does she have to do with me? Mom stared at the floor. I spent my whole childhood living in her shadow. I blinked. She was smarter. Prettier. More successful. My parents adored her. Every sentence came out slower than the last. When she died. Mom covered her mouth. I thought I'd finally stop comparing myself. The room felt strangely quiet. But then you were born. I felt a chill crawl across my arms. You smiled like her. You laughed like her. You even had her eyes. I couldn't move. Every time I looked at you. She sobbed openly now. I remembered losing her. My heart pounded. So you punished me? I wasn't trying to. You left me behind because I looked like your dead sister? She shook her head desperately. It wasn't that simple. It sounds exactly that simple. Dad returned carrying 3 worn leather journals. He placed them carefully on the coffee table. No one touched them. He looked at me. I wrote one. Your mother wrote one. And there's another. Who wrote the third? He hesitated. Your grandmother. I looked from the journals to him. Grandma knew. He nodded. She begged us to stop. Mom whispered. I couldn't. The room became painfully still. I reached for the first journal. Mom suddenly grabbed my wrist. Please. I looked into her tear-filled eyes. If you read those, there's no coming back. I slowly pulled my hand free. Then I opened the first page. The date at the top read, June 14th, 20 years ago. The very first sentence made the blood drain from my face. Today I told Claire she couldn't come on vacation. She cried herself to sleep. And I felt relieved. I couldn't breathe. The words on the page blurred together as tears filled my eyes. Today I told Claire she couldn't come on vacation. She cried herself to sleep. And I felt relieved. I read the sentence again. And again. My mother sat across from me with her hands clasped so tightly they were trembling. She didn't try to take the journal away. She didn't deny writing it. She simply watched me, waiting for the damage to unfold. I turned the page. Richard asked if we should reconsider. I told him no. Ethan smiled the entire drive to the airport. It was the first vacation that felt peaceful. Peaceful. That word sliced through me. Peace for them had always meant my absence. I swallowed hard and kept reading. Claire asks too many questions. She notices everything. When she's around, I can't pretend to be happy. Looking at her reminds me of Emily, and then I remember everything I lost. I slammed the journal shut. I was a child. My voice cracked so badly I barely recognized it. I was 13 years old. My father looked down. I know. No. I stood so quickly that the chair scraped loudly across the hardwood floor. Don't say you know. Neither of them spoke. You watched this happen. I did. You let it happen. I did. You watched your daughter cry every summer. His shoulders sagged. I did. I looked at him, hoping, just hoping, that he would finally defend himself. Instead, he whispered the words I never expected to hear. I failed you. The room fell silent. It wasn't enough to erase the past. But it was the first completely honest thing my father had ever said to me. I picked up his journal next. His handwriting was neat. Careful. The first several pages were ordinary. Work stress. Mortgage payments. Repairs around the house. Then I reached the summer I was 13. Karen says Claire will be happier with her mother this way. She says Ethan needs uninterrupted time with us. I don't agree, but every time I argue, we fight for days. I flipped another page. Claire asked why she couldn't come. I lied and blamed money. She hugged me anyway. I've never felt smaller. My vision blurred again. Another page. Karen booked only 3 tickets before telling Claire. I should have stopped it. I didn't. Then another. I'm beginning to think Claire believes she's the problem. I lowered the journal slowly. You knew. Dad nodded without looking at me. I knew. And you still said nothing. His eyes filled with tears. I thought I was keeping the family together. I laughed bitterly. There wasn't a family. There hadn't been one for years. There had only been a performance. A carefully rehearsed one. The vacations. The photos. The captions. The anniversary slideshow. Every smiling picture had been another brick in a wall built to keep me out. I reached for Grandma's journal. Unlike the others, Hers wasn't written every day. Only when something important happened. The first entry about me was short. Claire asked why she always stays with me in the summer. I told her I loved having her here. That was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. I smiled through tears. That sounded exactly like Grandma. Always protecting me without making me feel unwanted. The next entry hit even harder. I confronted Karen today. I told her she's punishing Claire for something that isn't her fault. Karen cried but refused to change her mind. Richard stayed silent. Another page. I offered to pay for Claire's ticket. Karen refused. Another. Richard apologized to me in private. He said he feels trapped. I asked him who was protecting his daughter. He had no answer. The room was completely silent except for my breathing. Every page confirmed what I had feared. Grandma had fought. Dad had surrendered. Mom had justified. And I had suffered. I closed the journal and looked at my parents. I spent years wondering what was wrong with me. Mom covered her face. I know. I thought I wasn't lovable. I know. I thought if I got better grades. She sobbed. If I cleaned more. Dad wiped his eyes. If I smiled more. Neither interrupted me. Maybe you'd finally choose me. I shook my head. But you never even gave me the chance. No one spoke for several long moments. Finally, Mom stood. I deserve everything you're saying. It was the closest thing to accountability she'd offered. Then she walked upstairs without another word. Dad remained seated. I've been in therapy. I looked at him, surprised. For 3 years. I hadn't expected that. My therapist told me I wasn't protecting my marriage. He swallowed. I was sacrificing my daughter. I didn't answer. I wanted to tell you so many times. But you didn't. No. He nodded slowly. I chose the easier path. The easier path for you. Yes. Not for me. Never for me. A few minutes later, Mom came back downstairs carrying a large storage box. She placed it gently on the coffee table. I think these belong to you. Inside were dozens of items. My elementary school drawings. My report cards. Birthday cards. Photographs. Even the seashell necklace I had made at summer camp when I was 11. I frowned. You kept all this? She nodded. Every piece. I looked through the box. There were hundreds of memories. Proof that she hadn't forgotten me. But somehow, that almost hurt more. You loved me enough to keep my drawings. She cried quietly. But not enough to take me with you. She couldn't answer. Because there wasn't one. Suddenly, the front door opened. Ethan walked inside. Behind him was Madison. They looked worried. We came as soon as Dad called, Ethan said. He looked around the room and immediately noticed the journals. You read them. I did. Madison walked over to me carefully. I didn't know. I believed her. I swear, Claire. Ethan told me years ago that you just didn't enjoy family vacations. I looked at Ethan. He closed his eyes. I repeated their lie. Yes. I hate myself for it. I know. Madison reached into her purse. I wasn't sure if I should bring this. She handed me a white envelope. What's this? I found it while cleaning our office last month. I opened it. Inside was an old family Christmas card. The picture showed Mom, Dad, Ethan, and me. Except something was wrong. The edges around my body looked uneven. Like someone had cut me out and glued me back in. I flipped the card over. A small note was written in Madison's handwriting. I had the original restored by a photo expert after I noticed something strange. Confused, I looked back inside the envelope. There was another photograph. The original. I stared at it for several seconds before realizing what I was seeing. I wasn't removed from vacation pictures. I had been removed from ordinary family photos, too. There were faint outlines where my body had once been standing. In one picture, Dad's hand rested awkwardly in midair. In another, Mom's arm wrapped around. No one. Someone had literally erased me. Not just every summer. From years of family memories. I looked up at my mother. She broke down completely. I couldn't stand looking at the pictures. Those words echoed through the room. But before anyone could speak again, the doorbell rang. Dad opened the door. A man in a grey suit stood on the porch. He looked directly at me. Claire Mitchell. Yes. My name is Daniel Forster. He handed me a sealed envelope. I was your grandmother's attorney. My heart raced. She asked me to give you this exactly 1 year after her passing. I looked down at the envelope. Across the front, in Grandma's familiar handwriting, were 7 words that made my pulse race. The truth your mother never wanted told. If you had just discovered a letter with a title like that, would you open it immediately, or wait until you were emotionally ready? Tell me in the comments. And if this story has touched you so far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes every child deserves to feel chosen, not replaced. My fingers wouldn't move. The envelope rested in my hands, but it felt as though it weighed 100 pounds. Across the front, Grandma's familiar handwriting stared back at me. The truth your mother never wanted told. The room was silent. Mom stood frozen near the staircase, her face drained of color. Dad looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Ethan and Madison exchanged nervous glances, neither daring to say a word. The attorney nodded gently. Your grandmother was very specific. She wanted you to receive that letter 1 year after she passed away. Did she tell you why? I asked. He shook his head. Only that you would understand when you read it. After offering his condolences, he quietly left. The front door closed. No one spoke. I slowly broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter, along with several folded documents. The first line made tears fill my eyes before I even reached the second sentence. My sweet Claire, if you're reading this, it means I wasn't able to protect you the way I promised myself I would. I swallowed hard and continued. You spent your childhood believing something was wrong with you. There never was. My hands trembled. Your mother loved you. I know that sounds impossible after everything you've learned, but love without healing can become something dangerous. I glanced at Mom. She was already crying. Grandma continued. Karen never hated you. She hated the grief she felt every time she looked at you. Instead of facing that pain, she ran from it. Sadly, she kept running for years. I took a shaky breath. I begged her to get counseling after Emily died. She refused. She believed ignoring the pain made her stronger. Instead, it allowed grief to make choices that love never would. The words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Grandma wasn't excusing what had happened. She was explaining it. There was a difference. I unfolded the documents tucked behind the letter. One was a copy of a therapy referral from over 20 years ago. It had my mother's name on it. Another was a letter from a counselor noting that my mother had cancelled every appointment. Then came the last page. A handwritten confession. Signed by my mother. Dated 16 years earlier. I know what I'm doing to Claire is wrong. Every summer I promise myself it will be the last. Every summer I tell myself I'll fix everything next year. Then June comes, and I panic all over again. I lowered the paper. The room was completely still. Mom finally spoke. I wrote that after your grandmother begged me one last time to stop. Why didn't you? I asked quietly. She looked at me with eyes full of regret. Because admitting I needed help felt like admitting I had failed. You did fail. I know. No. I shook my head slowly. You didn't fail because you needed help. You failed because you refused it. Those words seemed to break something inside her. She buried her face in her hands. I was ashamed. Dad walked over and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. So was I. He looked at me. I should have taken you on those vacations myself. You should have. I should have stood up to her. Yes. I should have protected my daughter. My voice softened. Yes. He nodded through tears. There isn't a day I don't regret it. For the first time since all of this began. I believed him. Not because regret erased the past, but because he stopped defending it. Ethan stepped closer. I owe you something too. You do. He took a deep breath. I spent years pretending everything was normal because I was afraid. I know. I was afraid they'd stop loving me the way they stopped showing up for you. His honesty caught me off guard. I thought if I questioned them, you'd become me? He nodded. Yes. I was a coward. You were also a kid. I wasn't when I learned the truth. No. He looked down. I've hated myself for that. I walked over to him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I hugged him. Not because everything was fixed. Not because the pain disappeared. But because carrying that anger forever would only make another victim. He hugged me back and cried harder than I'd ever seen. I'm so sorry, Claire. I know. Madison wiped away tears. The kids peeked around the hallway corner, confused by the adults crying. My niece whispered, "Is Aunt Claire okay?" I smiled through my tears. I think she's finally going to be. The months that followed weren't easy. Healing never is. I started seeing a therapist. Not because I was broken. Because I deserved someone to help me unpack years of believing I wasn't enough. Dad continued therapy. Mom finally started therapy for the first time in her life. She didn't ask me to forgive her. Not anymore. Instead, she accepted something much harder. That forgiveness, if it ever came, would happen on my timeline. Not hers. For nearly a year, we only met in public places. Coffee shops. Parks. Restaurants. I needed boundaries. Healthy ones. She respected every single one. If I ended a visit after 30 minutes, she didn't argue. If I didn't answer her calls for a week, she didn't complain. For the first time in my life, she stopped asking me to carry her emotions. Instead, she carried her own. One spring afternoon, Dad called. We're planning a family vacation. I smiled sadly. I hope you have fun. He was quiet for a moment. Claire. This time we're only going if you want to come. My eyes filled with tears. And if you don't, we're staying home. I laughed softly. You don't have to do that. Yes, he said. We do. Because a family vacation without one child wasn't a family vacation anymore. It was a reminder of everything they'd lost. Several weeks later, I stood on a beach with the ocean stretching endlessly in front of me. The waves rolled gently onto the sand. The same kind of beach I had imagined during all those lonely summers at Grandma's house. Dad walked over carrying 2 folding chairs. Mom handed me a bottle of sunscreen. Neither gesture erased the past. But neither tried to pretend the past hadn't happened. That mattered. Ethan's children pulled me toward the water. Aunt Claire, come build a sandcastle. I laughed. A real laugh. Not one pasted into a photograph. One that actually belonged there. Dad held up his phone. Family picture. I hesitated. Old memories rushed back. Then I nodded. We stood together. No one left out. No one edited in. No one erased. The camera clicked. Months later, Dad mailed me a framed copy. On the back he'd written one sentence. Our first honest family photo. It now hangs in my living room. Not because we're a perfect family. We'll never be. It hangs there because it's proof that the truth, no matter how painful, is stronger than the prettiest lie. Sometimes people ask if I forgave my parents. The answer isn't simple. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It isn't pretending something never happened. Forgiveness, for me, meant refusing to let their choices define the rest of my life. I still have boundaries. I still have difficult days every June. Some scars don't disappear. But scars also remind us that we survived what once tried to break us. Grandma used to tell me, the people who truly love you never need to erase you to make room for someone else. I didn't fully understand those words as a little girl. I do now. If someone has to shrink you, silence you, or erase you to create their version of a perfect family, the problem was never you. It was the story they were telling themselves. And once I stopped believing their story, I finally got to write my own. Have you ever experienced betrayal like this, or felt overlooked by the people who were supposed to love you most? What would you have done if you had discovered those journals? Share your story in the comments. I read them because your experiences remind others they're not alone. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that they are worthy of love exactly as they are. Until next time, take care of yourself, protect your peace, and remember, never let someone else's brokenness convince you that you were never enough.